Hey guys, what's up? This is Kazi from cleverprogrammer.com and you are watching Codecademy part 14. Yeah, you guys excited? I hope you guys are really excited because now we're about to get to even more exciting stuff. So, check it out. 46% complete. That's almost, we're halfway there. But keep in mind, there's one of those bitwise stuff, which is kind of weird. I'm almost thinking to skip it because it's so esoteric. So we're actually probably closer to 100% than you might think. Okay, we've completed all these parts. We've completed some of really tough stuff. And getting started is really the hardest part. As you start to get better at and understanding how computer programming is working, you can figure lots of the other stuff out easier, much easier. Okay, so let's keep going here. We finished student becomes teacher. That was a big one. That's why it was a unit in itself. And we got to lists and functions now. So this is going to be great. It says lists and functions. Now that you've learned about lists, let's turbocharge them with functions. Turbocharge with functions. That sounds great. And after that, that sounds even more epic. Battleship. But one thing at a time, let's continue on with lists and functions. Unit 7. Okay, list accessing. This is simple stuff. We've already done it. Who are they kidding, right? Oh, add your code here. This said print the second element. So n of 1. Print. Put parentheses around because I'm trying to train you for Python 3. Simple. We keep getting this badge over and over again. I love it though. List element modification. Okay, element modification. Change the element to something else. So, I don't know. On line 3, multiply the second, what does it say? Multiply the second element. So that by 5. So it would be n of 1 times 5 or times equals 5. But, you know, let's just use the longhand notation here to do this because like that book, Learn Python the Hard Way. Always try to do things the harder way first. Then you'll really get it and then the shortcuts and everything will come more naturally. Overwrite the second element with that result. Wait. I did. Yep. Print out the list. Okay, great. Okay, so you see, that was pretty simple. N was equal to 135. I multiplied the second element by 5, and now that's a result. A lot of people make this mistake. This is not changing what n of 1 was, right? This element right here. This is just taking that element and multiplying by 5. It does nothing by itself. Let me just show you. This is a point I do want to elaborate and not take for granted because it is confusing. If I did this, right, first of all, it wouldn't show you anything at all. But if I put in a print statement, you can see that all it does is it just multiplies that by 15. You're not actually saying, hey, change the value of it. So if I print out the list n, you'll see that n is still 135. You didn't actually change what the first element was. So that's why you have to go here and change n of 1 to be equal to n of 1 times 5. How I read it is, hey, the new n of 1 is going to be what n of 1 was / is times 5. So now n of 1 is incremented by itself being multiplied by 5. All right, let's keep rolling here. Appending to a list, we've already seen that append. It says append the number 4 and dot append 4. Easy. Easy, sleazy, whatever that means. Removing elements from a list. This exercise will expand on ways to remove items from a list. You actually have a few options. First, a list called n. So you can do pop and pop removes an item from the end of a list. So let me show you. If I did print and pop, here's what it does. It pops off the element and then prints it out. Now, why that's important is, check it out. If I do print n here, what pop actually does is now the new list is going to actually be 1, 3, and it prints that result. So it literally like breaks / pops it out at the end of the list, and then it shows it to the screen. So I almost think of it like pop just put its hand in the bucket of the list 1, 3, 5, took 5 and just shot it out. And since we used the print function, it took the 5 and shot it out to the screen, and it got pasted into the terminal right here, which is where it's showing, and it's not in the list, that bucket anymore. Okay, so I'll prove it to you by running this code here, and you will see, oh, I'm sorry, actually I have to put the 5 back in. I'll prove it to you by running this code here, and you will see that original list was 1, 3, 5, but after the n being popped and we print out n, you see that the pop printed out the 5, and then print n should have printed out 1, 3, 5, but because pop had already taken out 5 and threw it, smacked it against the screen, now the list only has 1, 3, 2 elements left in it. Okay, that's the function pop. That's what it does. It's a method, but I don't want to confuse you guys with too much terminology right now. Easy way to think about it is if it has a dot, it's most likely a method, and otherwise it's a function, just for now. Okay, n.pop index will remove the item at index from the list and return it to you. So you can also say, hey, instead of pop, which by default returns the last element, so in this case pop automatically puts in a 2 here because 0, 1, and 5 is at location 2. So if you don't put anything, it automatically puts in a 2 there. But if I do index of 1, you'll see that pop actually puts its hands in a bucket, takes out the 3, which is the first index item, and smacks it out to the screen because of print, and then that item is not in the list anymore. So you can see it right here. Right? 1, 5, it printed out the 3 at the top, it popped it out, and then it just printed out 1, 5 in the list. Okay, so we can do that, and we can also do remove. Now, what's the difference between pop and remove? Remove takes out that item, but it doesn't actually remove it from that, it actually removes the item, but it doesn't hold it anywhere. So pop, when you pop it out, right, let's say we do x is equal to n of pop, and that's it, right? And then I do print x, and then, okay, sure, I'll do print n as well. So what this does is this item got popped out and turned into 5, and then it printed out the x, which is why you get a 5, and then I printed out the list, and the print list is 1, 3. But with remove, it doesn't make that item usable. It doesn't return an item. It just removes the item. So if I try to n.remove, we actually have to pass in an index. So if I give it index 2, right? It'll store none here. Okay, so if I did n.remove 1, or if I did remove method does not take in indices. It actually takes in the number you want to give it. So I want to give it, let's say 5 for sure, right? It'll look for that 5 and it'll remove it, but it doesn't pop it out. So x is actually, none, because there's nothing. It just removes that item from the list, and that's it. So when you use the remove function, it doesn't make sense to actually store it anywhere. It's just for removing that item from the list, okay? Whereas pop pops it off. Also pop takes in an index. Great. And then there's delete, which is like pop in that it will remove the item at the given index, but it won't return it. So the only way it's like pop is because they both take in an index, but it doesn't actually return anything. So for example, if I did delete the item n 2, and I print n, well, that item is gone. But if I did x is equal to that and did print x, let's see what we get here. You actually, it says invalid syntax. It doesn't even allow you to do that. Okay, so when you use delete, you can only just do it on a line of its own pretty much. And it doesn't return anything, it just removes that item from the list. To me, I would use delete. That's a nice way to delete an item. And remember, when you're making games or anything more complicated, it doesn't always have to be integers that you're deleting, right? So don't think of it like, when would I need to delete a number? Well, sometimes you might have some more complicated information in there. You might have, let's say you're making a video game and it has a list of characters. Well, let's say that two of those characters, it's a 2 versus 2 whatever game, fighting game or whatever. If one of the character dies, one side only has 1 character and the other side has 2 characters. Well, from that list where you only have 1 character left, you're gonna delete the character from that list, okay? You're still using the same data structures even if you're making really complicated games. In the back end, you're still using dictionaries and lists and all those kind of things, okay? Remember that. And if you want to look more into making games with Python, there's a very great Python library called Pygame. So go there and play around with it if you want. And you can make really cool games. I have made a few games from that as well. All right. Remove the first item from the list and using either pop, remove, or delete. So I'm just going to use delete because it makes the most sense and it's the easiest to understand. Right, delete. It looks like your list is 1, 3 instead of 3, 5. Oh, they want us to remove the first element. Okay, congratulations. We've finished this section. Great. Next up is function recap. So a lot of things here, but let's get on to the next section. All right, changing the functionality of a function. Functionality of a function, that's a bit wordy there. In this exercise, you will just be making a minor change to a function to change what the function does. Change the function so the given argument is multiplied by 3 and returned. Again, they're using terminology here, programming specific terminology, not to necessarily throw you off, but to just get you attuned to how programming terminology works and that you start paying attention to it, okay? At first, you might be like, what? It's like sometimes mathematicians when they're using something like, given this conjecture, according to proposition 3, we have the following proof, you know, A intersects B. So we're going to try to demystify all of this and simplify it. What is an argument? It's whatever you put in the parentheses, okay? If you have something comma and another argument, that's now you have 2 arguments, okay? These are arguments. Function, this is the name of your function. This is the argument that it takes. I mean, that's the information it's dependent on for this function to run, right? If you wanted to calculate a trip to some other country, you would have to take into account how much the plane ticket costs, how much the hotel there costs, how much you're going to spend there. So automatically that function is dependent on 3 inputs, okay? So that's the function being defined here, and now here they're calling the function. So what they're saying is change the function so the given argument is multiplied by 3 in return. Everything is fine except they're taking the argument, which is the x, and they're adding it by 3. So what they're doing is if I did, so I made number is equal to 5. Let me just put it here for simplicity's sake, and I pass in 5 to our function. What is it going to do? It's going to change this x with our number, which is 5. It's going to put a 5 there. It's going to do 5. 5 plus 3 gives you 8, and it's going to return it, right? So let's check it out. We got back 8. We want to make it so instead of being added by adding by 3, we multiply by 3. It's as simple as changing the plus sign to an asterisk. You get back a 15. Let's give it a try, and I can guarantee you that we are correct. Guarantees. Next, More than one argument. This exercise is to recap how to use more than one argument in a function. Define a function. Okay, simple, okay? 2 arguments in a function. I've given you this problem before, but I'm going to give it to you again. Try to do it without looking at anything. Make a function that takes in 2 arguments and returns their sum. Or make a function that takes in 2 arguments, a and b, and returns their multiplication or their product. Do it quickly. All right, I'm going to show you. I'm going to define a function sum, a comma b, return a plus b. Now to use this function, I'm just going to say sum of 2 comma 5. I'm going to say print, and you're going to see that's going to give me 2 plus 5, which is 7. For the multiplication one, I will say define multiply. Did I spell it right? No, I did not. Multiply a comma b, return a times b, and I can say print multiply 2 comma 5, which should give me back a nice 10. So that therefore I get a 7 and a 10. Here, function, it's very simple. Define a function called add function that has 2 parameters, x and y, and adds them together. The function name should be add function, has 2 parameters and added them together. Simple. Define add function. 2 parameters. I can call these parameters whatever I want. Okay, just to prove a point here, a ridiculous point. A lot of people think that it has to do with these parameters names and that they should match your definition. No, these are arbitrary, which means that you just make them up, whatever you want, whatever you feel like that day. Okay? But don't make it so confusing that when somebody else is reading your code is like, what is this? What is this language this person is using? All right, return this plus this. Okay, and it's gonna say I'm right. Well, of course I'm right. Okay, but that should really be wrong because that's a terrible names. Let's make the name simpler. We can call it M and N if we wanted to be consistent with everything else. We can call it A and B. I like A and B for this. But if it was really up to me, I would actually call it num1, maybe like this, and num2, and then say num1 plus num2. Okay, or if I really wanted to be very clear with what's going on, I would call it number 1 plus number 2. And now this reads really nicely. We're defining an add function that takes in a number 1 and a number 2 and returns number 1 plus number 2. It's really easy to read than A and B, some arbitrary variables. All right, start next lesson. String and functions. Write a function called string function that takes in a string argument and then returns that argument concatenated with the word world. Don't add a space before world. Takes in a string and then returns that argument concatenated with the word world. Okay, simple. Let's try it. Let's create a function that takes in an input and adds something to it. So let's say that we took in whatever we took in, we wrote ice cream next to it, okay, if we wanted to. So we would just simply say, I would define the function, define string function, and it would take in something, and what it would do is return something plus is not an ice cream. That's what I wanted to say. Okay, with the period. Let's run it. Oh yeah, print Python 3, you gotta put parentheses. Hello is not an ice cream. Because we took the string function, passed in hello to it. What it did is went up to the string function, put in hello for something, and everywhere it saw something, it put hello there. If you put hello right here, now it says hello plus is not an ice cream. Notice I put a little space here. If I didn't put that space right there, you would see, okay, well, first of all, okay, so let's say I didn't put this space here, you'd see hello, is not an ice cream right next to each other. So I put a space there. It makes it nice. Okay. And if I wanted to be fancier and use string, well, I think this is pretty simple. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. So did you? I just want to make sure you understand what we did. Okay. So again, put in hello for n, right? This is n. So this is hello. String function gets called on hello. This parameter takes in that hello and then returns hello plus whatever we want to put there. So now you try doing this one on your own and then watch the video. All right, so I'm going to define it right here. So define string function, takes in something, returns something plus they want us to say world. Don't forget to add a space before world. You see that? Don't add a space before world. Oh. So I guess they want you to do it at the same location. All right, hello world. Look at that. Introduction to using functions with lists. Nice. So now we have a function right here, define list function. It takes in something. We're assuming that something right now is a list, and it returns that. And we're creating a list n outside of the function, and then we're printing out the result of calling that function and passing in that list. So what happens is that n is this, it goes to that, replaces this with the list, and then it returns that list. This whole thing just turns into that list and gets, this whole thing gets turned into that list, and because of that, that gets printed out to the screen 357. So let's run this one really quickly. Okay, fairly simple. Using an element from a list in a function. Passing a list to a function will store it in the argument, just like with a string or a number. Okay. So what are they saying here? Passing a list to a function will store it in the argument. So basically what they're saying is that if you pass it in here, this argument here, this x is stored, that argument is stored, so that list is stored in the argument. All right. What they're showing here is something really simple. We have, okay, it's kind of cool, and so let's talk about it. Right? So this argument here is just an arbitrary argument. If you gave it a number, it would be really confused on line 2, because let's say you gave it a 5, it would come down here and it would say, give me the 0th index of 5? And then it'd be like, what the heck am I talking about? That doesn't make any sense. And the program would poop out and give you a giant red error saying, you can't index an integer. Right? If I open up my terminal and showed you really quickly, it said like int object is not subscriptable, right here. It'll like start crying. So we're assuming that we're getting a list. So let's say if we got a list here, then this part turns into a list, 5, 4, and calling 0 on this list, getting the 0th index of that, well, that simply evaluates to 5. And that actually gives us back something nice. So imagine we created a list called numbers, and we passed that list to the function first item. It would go up to that. Items would be stored as this list right here, 279, and on 279 we would get the 0th index of 2, 7, and 9. What's the 0th index of 2, 7, and 9? It's 2. This would get evaluated to 2, and that would get shot out to the screen. So let's see it in slow motion. All right. Sorry, I'm not going to go into post-production and make it slow motion, but you hopefully got my point. All right, let's keep rolling. Change line 2, so that list function returns only the item stored in index 1 of x rather than the entire x list. So we are going to pull out index 1. So if we pass it in this list, it would pull out 5. But when will this, it's also always good to think about when will this program poop out. You know why? Because if you have friends who are programming, you want to crack their code and you want to break their code to embarrass them. And also hopefully to teach them not teach them a lesson, but to maybe help them find a bug so they can fix it. And there are also jobs called programming testers who make a ton of money every year. So programming testing is an actual job. So their job is to try to see what edge cases break the code. So it's a good idea to try to break the code all the time. Either you can make fun of your friends or get a high-paying job, or both. So the case where this would break the code is if I gave it a list of only one element. It will try to index the second element because it has a 1 right here, and it will poop out and give an error. I can also give it a list with no elements. I can also, what if I gave it a dictionary? What if I gave it an integer, right? Or a float number? All of those would give you back errors. If I gave it a string, right, like hello, that would work because you can index a string, so it would pull out the E. But if I gave it a string with only one letter in there, it would poop out, right? So just be aware of that. Okay, this should be good. We gave it 357. It went up here, pulled out the second element, 5, or the index 1, and returned it. Very simple. Modifying an element of a list in a function. Okay, so we're just modifying an element of a list. Okay, so basically, let's say that we have this list 357, right? What we want to be able to do is pass it to a function and have it change one of the values inside of that list to something else permanently. So let's say right now this is 5. Once I take this list and dump it into my function machine that churns out some kind of output, so I dump it into my function machine takes this list and changes one of the elements and then returns the list. Okay, so let's say that I wanted every number in my thing to be multiplied by 3, or I wanted one of the numbers to be completely changed and multiplied by 3. So let's say I take define a changer. I'm just gonna call it changer, and it's gonna take in some list. I'll just say list 1, and I'll take the list 1's second item, the second item, and multiply it, multiply it by 5 and change it like permanently. Right? So since I want to change it permanently, what I'm saying is that the new list 1, so the new second element of that list is what that element was up to this point multiplied by 5. Okay, so and here I don't have to return anything. I can just say print list 1, right? That's it. And I can say print list 1 here as well, just so it can print out and show you how the changes took place. And here I can define some list. I'm not gonna call it list 1 because I don't want you guys to get confused that function arguments have to match the variable names outside of the function. Sometimes people get confused with that, so I'm not gonna make it list 1 just to not confuse you, but list 1 would be a perfectly good name. I'm just gonna call it list underscore, and I'm gonna say this list is, has 3 elements in it, and I'm gonna call my changer function on this list. So let's run it, and you can see that it was 5, 4, and 5, but after it got thrown into my function changer, right, this machine, and then once it goes into this machine, the machine is like, like it does something to it for 3 whole lines, right, 2, 3, 4, but really the third line does something to it. So it takes it and it churns up that one of the numbers in it and mutates it, changes it to something else, and so now that 4 is now a 20, and then it takes that and just returns it or whatever, and that's it, we're done. So they're just kind of showing you that here, and actually they're giving you example that does just that. So it takes in the 0th element and multiplies it by 2. So it takes in the first element and multiplies it by 2. That's really what they're doing. Okay, so we're going to change it so that add 3 to the item at index 1 of the list. So we're going to take, this is index 1, and we're going to add 3 to it, right? We're not just doing this because this will just take that number, and if it's 5, we'll just do 5 plus 3 and 8 and done. You're not saying that, hey, make the first element 8. You're just saying take the first element and just add 3 to it. And then what? Don't even print it, don't do anything to it, just add 3 to it. So it'll go, sure, you'll do that on the back end, but it won't, that statement won't be useful to you. So you want to say, do that to x of 1. What x of 1 was up to this point, or I'm sorry, the new x of 1 should be what it was up to this point plus 3. Okay. Store that result back into index 1, and we did all that on line 2, and return the list. So return x in this case. Terrible names, but that's okay. So you can see that we passed it the list 3, 5, 7, but we took the second element, incremented it by 3, and made the 5 into an 8, and kept the rest of the list the same. Okay, where are we? We're at modifying an element of a list, and we're in the section Introduction to Using Functions with Lists. Let's see how long the next part is. So we're gonna finish this part, and this will be the last part of this video, and this is Codecademy Python part 14. Hard to keep track of this now, but this should be the last thing we're gonna do, and then I'll see you guys in the next video. So let's keep going through this right here. All right. You can also append or delete items of a list inside a function, just as if you were manipulating the list outside of a function. So you guys have already seen a little bit of how we do append and delete items and remove and pop and so on and so forth. Define a function called list extender. Define list extender that takes in, that has one parameter. LST is a common way of saying list in Python. The reason why we don't say actually list is because list is a defined word. So that's why we try to stay away from that, right? Just like del is a defined word, or print is a defined word, tuple is a defined word. So we try to stay away from using the defined words because we don't want to change the meaning of something that already exists in Python itself. So LST, and inside the function append number 9 to the list. So we're going to do list.append 9. So that will attach on a 9. So if we pass it this list, then it would just tack on a 9 like that. And then return the modified list. So return. What will happen if I had to break it down? N is equal to this. It'll pass that into the function list extender. It'll come up here, pass that list in right there. It would take this list and do dot append on it and append a 9 to it. And now this list effectively becomes that, and then it returns that list with the 9 at the end of it. Now let's check it out. Don't take my word for it. Let's prove it by running this. And you can see that we have added a 9. Congratulations, guys. We've finished this section. This is it for this video. This is Kazi from cleverprogrammer.com. And this is the end of Codecademy part 14. I will see you guys in the next video.